Alright guys, so today we're going to do a chain and sprocket on a 2014-15 Honda Grom. To do this you're going to need 12mm wrench, 10mm wrench, 5mm Allen, however you want to do it. T-handle is what I like. Chain brake, or you can use a grinder. Just whatever you got laying around. 19mm socket, 14mm socket, 8mm socket on a decent size extension, and a flathead screwdriver. And of course you've got your Sprocket D.I.D chain, 36 tooth rear sprocket. Do a 14 front sprocket. It's a Sunstar. So let's get started. First thing you're going to do, pull the wheel off, pull the axle out. You got a 14mm on this side, 19mm on the other side. Pull your axle out, slide your wheel out. Stock chain has a master link here that's pink, so we'll pop the clip off of that, get the chain off. We'll have to pull this cage off of this bike. And you're going to pull this cover off, front sprocket's behind there. So we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, first thing we'll do, get the wheel off and this chain guard. Alright, we'll go ahead and get this master link off here. What I usually do, take your pair of pliers, just get on the nub of that chain on the back side and the front side of that clip, and you just squeeze it together. Should be able to pop it off of there. Just like that. That's your clip, part of your chain, just slide that out. If you want, you can go ahead and hook your new chain on with that master link and just pull it through. But since we're going to change the front sprocket, we'll have to have the chain off up there anyway. So I'd only recommend that if you're just changing the chain or the rear sprocket. So go ahead and pull that out. Put all that in your stock parts pile. We'll go ahead and pull the wheel the rest of the way off. Be careful not to lose the spacers, the wheel. Just set that off to the side for now. The cage off of there, I've already got the bolts loose to that, so just kind of skip this step. But you don't have a cage, you don't have to worry about it, obviously. Next step, take this front cover off. That'd be your 8mm extension. Let's see, bolts. There's one on top, one on the bottom, right behind the foot peg. Already had those loose as well. There's a little clip up here that holds these wires. You have to kind of spread that apart, get those wires out, and then just kind of fish the cover out. Make sure you don't lose this. This is if your chain ever does break, supposed to prevent it from cracking the case. Doesn't always work, but it is a good thing to have. So make sure you at least put that back on, even if you don't put this cover back on, or if you do an aftermarket cover, make sure it's got that brace in there. Okay, there's your front sprocket. Go ahead and put the bike in gear. May have to turn this over a little bit so it locks into gear. And just crack these nuts loose, bolts. Crack these bolts loose. They're not very tight. Alright. Now, after you've done that, you got this retainer on here. You have to rotate that just till it's out of the teeth. It's got these little grooves on it that lock onto your counter shaft in there. So basically you put it on like that, turn it just a little bit, align your bolt holes, and that'll keep your sprocket from sliding off. And just pull your sprocket off. That 15 tooth on this. This should be the stock front sprocket. So we're going to drop down one tooth to a 14. So just slide that on. Put your retainer back on. And put your bolts back in. There's a little groove on the counter shaft where that retainer clip actually spins. So the sprocket doesn't actually sit all the way up against the case. It's actually out towards the foot peg a little bit. And just tighten those bolts back up. They don't have to be super tight. Alright, so front sprocket's done. Now we'll go ahead and go to the rear. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and swap this rear sprocket out. Take these 4 bolt nuts off here. 14 millimeter, I believe. Alright, your stock rear sprocket is actually a 34. So we're going from 34 to a 36. Not a huge difference, but is a difference. And again, the stock was from a 15 to 14. So let your stock pop. Put this on, you want the dish side up with your numbers facing out. The back side's flat, nothing stamped on it, so go ahead and stick that on. Put your nuts back on, tighten them down. Alright, now your rear sprocket's done. Sure you got it pushed in there all the way. Spacers in there if it fell out. Spacers in the other side. We'll go ahead and throw the wheel back on. We've got the dual caliper bracket on this, so it's kind of tricky to get your pads lined up. It should just slide down on there. Make sure you've got it in your slide on your swing arm. Also, you want to make sure you get it through your chain tensioners also. Sometimes that's a bit tricky, especially with the dual caliper bracket, but as long as your spacers are in there straight, everything should slide back together pretty. You can just kind of snug this up a little bit. Don't tighten it yet. That way we can still move the wheel around and figure out how long this chain needs to be. So that's going to be our next step. Putting the chain on. Run it through. We can put the bike back in neutral. Careful not to get your hands smashed up in the chain. Just go ahead and route your chain. Alright. Obviously this chain has more than enough links, so we're going to end up taking a lot of those off. What I like to do, what you should do rather, loosen up your chain tensioner nuts back these all the way up. That way you can slide your wheel as far forward as it'll go. Push that wheel up so it won't go anymore. That way, as your chain stretches, you got to pull your wheel backwards to tighten it up. So if you're at the frontmost part of this, that means you're going to get the most life out of your chain. Now what you do, get the slack out of your chain and get it on the closest length that you can, which is right here. So that's the one we're going to need to take out with the chain breaker or the grinder. If you're doing a grinder, just grind that nub down on both sides. Take your flathead screwdriver in there with the hammer and you can pop it apart, whatever. But the parts that you're actually wanting is the skinnier part of the chain. That's what you want to end up with when you cut this. So make sure you're not on the outside links. You're getting to the inside links. That's the ones you want. Because when you put that clip on through there, it needs to be able to go through the inside links. So we're going to go ahead and pop this chain apart with the chain brake. I'll show you guys how to do that next. Alright, so it's a good idea to go ahead and mark which one you're wanting to pop loose with a paint pen. So the one with that green dot, that's where we're going to want to break this chain. We'll go ahead and get our chain brake ready. There. All right. And now, take your master link and put it on the back side, like this. We'll go ahead and put this together first. Right there. Slide it through. Like that. And then this part. Then your clip. Now I've heard people say put these pointing in the direction the chain's going. The stock one was facing the opposite of that, so that's the way we're going to put it back on. So just set it in there, your grooves. Should just clip on. Make sure it's seated. It should be good. We'll go ahead and pull this wheel back. Take the slack off of our bolts here. So we can go ahead and put everything back together. Get the bike on the ground, get some weight on it, and then we'll tension that chain. Tighten up your axle. Put your chain guard back on if you want to. Another cool thing, when you're changing these sprockets, like if you don't want, your speedometer is obviously going to be off. It's not going to read right. So if you don't buy a speedo healer and you don't want to keep racking up the miles on your bike that aren't real, your speed sensor is right here. Follow this wire up and unplug it. Your speedometer won't work, your odometer won't work, so it won't tell you how fast you're going, which isn't going to matter because it's not right anyway, but at least it's not putting those fake miles on your bike. Your RPMs and all that stuff will still work. But I'd recommend just getting a speed healer if you're that worried about it. Go from there. So we're going to start buttoning this thing back up and then drop it down, tighten up the chain. Should be good, but make sure The other thing you want to check, your chain's in line with your front sprocket and your rear sprocket. That should be about it. Put it back together and ride it. Check your tension on your chain and should be good.